Yeah, so we are basically, today's webinar is actually going to be a different setup than last week. So last week we had two really great speakers and a really great debate afterwards. And I really hope that everyone got something valuable out of it. I know I definitely did. And it will be available to watch as well on our website. But the way it's going to work today is Ingrid's going to share her screen, and we're going to have just a very short clip of the High Street, basically about the High Street. One I think is from 2018, and the second one is from 2020. Is that right?
Yeah, last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So after each video, we're just going to have like basically just a discussion between us all. I know Lara just said that in Urban Lab 2 they're doing about the post-pandemic city and the High Street, aren't they? So yeah, let us know what you think, and also let us know if the audio works. But Ingrid's going to start sharing her screen now.
Yeah, can you all see that?
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and if I...
Today's High Street...
Can you hear that, if that was clear?
Yeah. ...is facing major scrutiny this year, with many well-known chains closing their doors or facing financial crisis. The recently rebranded John Lewis & Partners saw first-half profits crash by 99%, whilst House of Fraser was brought out of administration this summer after being saved by the Sports Direct deal. With many consumers choosing to spend their money on experiences rather than going into shops, this begs the question, what is the future of the British High Street?
I used to shop on the High Street fairly regularly, not regularly as such, but maybe once a month at push. Whereas now it's once a year, probably once a year at Christmas time, that I actually go into town to do shopping.
From going for a lunch date with a friend. So yeah, I don't actually buy that much from a high street anymore.
Environments, they want personalised purpose, they want convenience, they want ease, they want entertainment. No longer is the store a place to just come and pick up an item, it's a place to be hosted in, educated. It's a meeting point with your friends. If you look at what someone like Apple has done with their stores, which they're now calling their town squares, they've become these kind of community hubs where people, particularly Gen Z and millennials, are actually going, they're going to their friends, let's meet at the Apple store. The store has become more than just a place for transaction. It's the sort of center of the community now.
Historic furniture brand Heels has built on the idea that shopping in-store should provide an experience for the consumer. Working with McGarry Byrne London, they launched an exhibition in-store as part of London Design Festival entitled Spaces.
I'm here in our flagship store on Tottenham Court Road in the centre of our Spaces campaign. So we have launched Spaces for London Design Festival. We have worked with 5 women who we believe to be pioneering within their field, and we've asked them to recreate the spaces that they have at home. So the places that they write, the places that they paint, the places that they design. And for each of the spaces, we've really worked with the ladies who've created these spaces in particular to make it really feel authentic. So we want it to just feel like a room set, it wants to feel like their actual home.
What's great about this exhibition is it tries to tell some of the stories behind that, the creativity and the design process that these designers go through. You know, to the people that shop at Heels, that's the stuff that they're fascinated in. That's why they come to the store.
So customers want more and more. They want more experiential. All of our teams here are really knowledgeable about the things that we sell, and that is really important because customers don't just want a experience where they come in and buy something quickly and leave. They want to feel that they understand about the product, where it's been made, what the materials are. And that's a shopping experience, but I think experiential is going to play a huge part of it.
The Walt Disney Company is one brand that has remodeled its high street stores and online experience to try and meet the needs of today's consumer. Disney's strategy seems to be working. They've recently seen positive results, reporting significant double-digit growth in traffic and sales in August 2018 compared with August 2017.
So the experience has always been really important to us at Disney Store, but we're making a few adjustments just to make it even more magical for people that visit us. So for example, we're trying to add in more sculptures, more photo moments, so people can come, they can stand next to a Spider-Man sculpture, they can share that on social media. In our Oxford Street store, which is our flagship in the UK, we have an incredible Cinderella carriage, so people can see it from the front when they're walking past the store. And the queues there every day, people wanting to get in, take a photo, and then share it on social. So it's really about taking what we're good at and making it even better.
So aside from going in store, what are the shopping habits of consumers today? How are brands able to merge their physical stores to the online experience?
The first one I go to is Debenhams. I go here because I like to buy the kids' clothes from there, especially when they have a sale on. So I'll just quickly go to, at the moment, they've got like 50% off. So I'm just clicking on there.
Consumers want to be able to shop however, wherever, whenever they want. They expect to be able to shop across platforms, across channels at any time of day. They want to order online and pick up in store. Ultimately, they want a seamless shopping journey and a really convenient and quick, easy transaction at the end.
We can't underestimate online and ensuring that our store and our online experience work really well together, and that customers get seamless experience. So they can come into store, they can see something they love, they can sit on it, they can feel the material, and then if they want, they can go home and find that same product, and they can buy it from the comfort of their own home. And that they can interact with us on different levels, whether it's through our social media channels, whether it's in store, whether it's online, and making sure that people feel that they've got a voice and that they're being heard.
We've just launched our new website, shopdisney.co.uk, and that website is about allowing people to have an easier journey to purchase. So your pages load quicker, you can find out about delivery options more easily. Plus also the big thing about Shop Disney is about really expanding the product that we've got available. So we heard from our consumers that they wanted more adult product, and it was an area that we were lacking in. So we've brought in some really cool brands that you wouldn't necessarily expect us to have. So brands like Hype, Cath Kidston, Samsonite. So we've brought those brands in, we've expanded our adult offering, and that's something that we've done on the website, because then we've also taken that concept and put it into our stores as well. So we don't want people to think about us as just a kids' toy store. We want them to think of us as a Disney brand store, and that is true whether you're shopping in store or online with us.
So what are our findings? Ultimately, consumers are shopping very differently today, wanting convenience when purchasing and looking for a worthwhile experience when venturing into stores. Although some brands have adapted their shopping experiences, the High Street needs to keep evolving in order to ensure it has a future.
So yeah, that was the first one. And I think the main sort of focus of that was obviously having the experience rather than just the shop, so that there's something to draw people to the high street. I'm just going to admit someone else. But yeah, I think that's really what people are saying is needed in the high street at the moment, is having these experiences, things that you can't potentially access online. I think that's the key thing. I'd kind of be interested to know actually how many of you, I suppose without us being in the lockdown, but how often you visit a high street, or how often you'd actually use your local high street, and what you'd use it for, and whether there's still plenty of shops there.
I personally hate shopping, so I'd give anything not to go and to the high street. It just tires me. Just basically tires me. But the whole shopping experience tires me. Everything that they were talking about tires me. If they were proposing another type of experience, like I've seen other models proposing, I don't know, outdoors fruit and vegetable markets, or just mixing, maybe shopping but something else, cafes, then yeah, maybe I would go as a destination, as a place to go. But for the shopping for me, it's a no.
Yeah, I think especially the convenience of ordering online, unless it was, I suppose, home furniture and you'd want to test it out or something. I think it's just the appeal of the convenience of ordering online. But yes, no, I agree.
I agree as well, Lara. I think very rarely I would go and just shop around. Normally I would just go and find what I need and leave as soon as I can. Whereas I think maybe I'm not that old, but maybe when I was younger, 10 years ago, I'd want to go into town on a Saturday with my mum and be like, Mum, let's walk around the high street and see what new shops have opened. But I do think that now I'm Amazon next.
Yeah, I think the fundamental thing to ask is, because I've been reading a lot because of Urban Lab 2 and, you know, just interested in general. Of course, even before the pandemic, even before the virus, I think people, I haven't seen statistics, but I think people were shopping more online, of course. And I wonder, and you can see now as well the high street in Oxford because of the shopping center and everything, even the shopping center in decline, the high street in decline, lots of empty places. So I think I'm interested in learning a little bit about where we're heading in terms of what sort of activities are people now more interested in doing, you know, what would attract, what would engage people, and how can the high street be redefined to incorporate those things, you know, whether it's like I don't know, public art. Georgia might know a little bit more about that, or some sort of what Young L says, you know, just place for people to stay, which is totally opposite what happened in the high street in Oxford. They even designed the benches like that so people wouldn't stay. It's so uncomfortable, so you just keep moving. So I think it's a major change of thinking, and before the pandemic was already happening, and now then even more, I think. Don't know, what do you think, George?
Yeah, we had a very interesting project in Fleet, Hampshire, and that was with our postgraduate urban design students, because they experienced decline of their high street much earlier than perhaps Oxford and other places. And there were a lot of empty shops. So we decided to work with local artists, and then agreed with the owners of the empty shops to have application from Arts Council into setting up artists on High Street. And you could go, you could do your pottery, you could do your sewing, you could do different things. And that started to bring people back into the high street. And we called it going into town. And instead of going into a shopping center, we were trying to work with local traders and schools, etc., to kind of repopulate the high street. And that triggered off, and I think you can read about it on the internet, and that triggered off gradual return of what I would call artisan shops. Now, I don't mean just artist shops, but small bakers, small tailors, small bookshop owners, etc. And it became a very successful kind of experience. But I think what is critical is also where we are, which high street we are talking about. So there was quite a lot of studies about Oxford, why Oxford changed its high street. And even if you look at, you know, before the shopping center came on board, that people were shopping online, but they were going into town for social interaction. And towns that have a lot of university students also survive. So what we have done is turn the high street and the town center into large eating emporium, which I think is wrong anyway. But I think we are now looking again in terms of, you know, do we return some of the other more traditional businesses? And if I look at my local district high street, which is in Summertown, it hasn't got any empty shops, because if somebody runs out of business, there is always demand because people walk, people go there. So it's within 15-minute walking distance, so you can get there. But to look at London as it was in the film is slightly different, because London is cosmopolitan place, and it also relies on tourists and others. So the profile there is different. But look at the London Borough of Westminster, because they have developed a very good scheme in terms of how to reuse some of the empty shops through tax incentives and also business rates, etc. So there are different examples that can help us to kind of conceptualize that.
Yeah, the other thing I also think, and I don't know if in any of the examples you mentioned, Georgia, they did that, is I think we should bring housing back to the high street. You know, just put people to live there. And the Summertown district high street is a good example of why there are not empty shops, because most of the shops are independent. And that may be the type of experience that people want, because we are, I mean, for sure, fed up of the same, you know, same things cloned everywhere. So of course, in the Cowley Road, which is my high street, there's similar things. Although the rents are really high and some people can't afford, still independent shops are more attractive because you want, you know, a more authentic experience. You want to shop small, not have those millions of options, big barn type of shops. So that's why I think Summertown is positive. And in the high streets like Core Market, for example, I would say yes, this sort of artisan shops or this live and work type of unit. So I would be, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if we had the high streets being reinvented as more like traditionally, where people were place where people would work and produce and sell and all the same, rather than this is where you work, this is where you live, which meets more or less the 15-minute city. I bet if you apply the 15-minute city model into the high street, you will need to put people to live there as well.
I think it's quite interesting, actually. Also, it would be specific to certain places and a certain demographic. But I think, like in the video with Disney, where they were having things for like photo opportunities and social media, I think that's also quite important. Because it's not something you can do online, and people will then get out, go to a place, potentially shop there and take pictures, share it. So I think that's quite common as well.
If I can also add, I have been working with team from Project for Public Space, and they have been doing a lot of projects across the world. And what they are now trying to do is reintroduce the markets, the street markets, because they also bring people in. So even if you look at Gloucester Green, it's thematic. On different days you have different things. People go to shop vegetables, etc. So in New York particularly, they have targeted different areas, and markets are now beginning to have a sort of cultural dimension. So it isn't just to go there, but it's also to meet, to have demonstration of jewelry making or whatever. So I think markets are now being reintroduced in different cities across the globe, and that they are finding that this is also helping the local economy. And I think Mexico City is a good example. I think Isabel mentioned it, because what they have there is that what I would call corporate shops, so you know, Debenhams and John Lewis's, etc., have a partnership working with street vendors. And therefore, street vending provides very cheap merchandise, and therefore you get variety of people to go into the area, and both benefit each other. And there is there was a very good project funded by the Mexican Lottery Fund and carried out by Cecilia de la Marcora, and there is a publication about it, and it's still very active and working. And then the street traders were trained in business management, so that they could upgrade their stalls, they could run their businesses in a way that would make them a better return. And I think this was another model in terms of street trading, and also corporate shops are coming together to create that experience.
I think, Ben, did you want to add in?
Yes, yeah, great, thank you. Just reflecting on the experience of my hometown Stroud in Gloucestershire, which has got a very long established farmers market now, which brings the whole town to life on a Saturday. It's been interesting to see how that's adapted into kind of COVID. But what's happened, that whole social dimension's really taken off, and the high street's actually been hilarious because it's just full of people standing around socially distanced with their coffees, just filling the entire space. And if you're trying to move through, you have to kind of dodge through like a pinball, making your way down between everybody who's just brought out to have that social experience. The other thing that I just wanted to raise in terms of use of public space that's been really interesting is the kind of political dimension. And we have lots of, again, Stroud's got a reputation for having a lot of interesting viewpoints politically. And so, I mean, pre-COVID, there were constantly stands and people not selling things, well, selling ideas, I suppose, and therefore for debate. And so that brought a whole extra level of vitality to the high street, which wasn't just commercially driven. And the other thing I wanted to reinforce was the kind of living in town centres, small market towns. And again, Stroud's had an initiative for many years to bring more people in to live above shops and so on. I think that is now paying off in terms of the stopping the tumbleweed blowing through town once you get past 5 o'clock. So.
Make sure I visit Stroud's High Street then.
Everybody's welcome.
It's the place to be.
It's a great place. Saturday morning when the market's on, it's got a really good vibe to it. Other times it does feel a bit like some kind of zombie film, but it shows you what the potential is, and they're actually spreading the markets out onto more days and promoting that. A lot of the initial resistance to the farmers market has melted away because the shop owners now realise that people come to the market and then they'll spend money in the shops when they're there.
Yeah, markets are great things. Yeah, I think Isabel had.
Oh yeah, I'm following up with about Georgia. Yes, Mexico has a long time history with markets. Mostly Mexico City in the capital, and even with the existence of the supermarkets in a more than 25 million city, is a mass. It used to be for many years the biggest city in the world, and the markets are a very important part of the urban scenery in Mexico. In my area in Yucatan, just the central market in historical areas are still going on. But because they've been, other parts of the city are usually being, they find out that if you put a really big supermarkets, that's kill the traditional markets. And I would like to highlight in the UK, I've been to Cirencester. I've been invited. Last year just before the lockdown started, the mayor of Farringdon is really concerned about the lack of the poor input about the market in Farringdon. I don't know if you know, the oldest market in the UK, I think, is in Farringdon. And then and people don't visit, so it's been dying because it's on Tuesday and people usually work. So we already told him, if you change the date on a Saturday, people might be able to go. But they're reluctant to change it because they said traditionally it's on Tuesday. So they have created another market a month, one Saturday per month, every month. And he took us to visit. We have an interview, a very interesting interview, a landscape architect in Cirencester. So when I went there, I noticed the high streets are still really well designed high street. But they said the key of the proposal was first that they introduced a very interesting market twice a week, and they don't big chains like Tesco, Sainsbury, and big supermarkets are not allowed to open there. So they take them away. So everything in the high street it's tiny shops, and it's had been a quite good success. It's a very big success. So if you have any chance, I recommend you to see Cirencester case.
Yeah. Can I add something?
I think Emma has a hand up before.
Okay, I'll wait.
Yeah. Go for it, Emma.
Yeah, I'll just figure out how to lower the hand as well. Our lower hand. I just wanted to make a comment about what the sort of the factors are that enable sort of markets and small businesses and independent shops to work, which I think I was just thinking about because of the area where I live, which is in Rose Hill, where, you know, if you compare it to Summertown, Summertown has a huge number of successful independent shops. I mean, I think part of the reason for that is there's people with quite a lot of money to spend in Summertown that will support those independent shops. And in Cowley, you've got all of the students that will support local shops. And I think there'd be quite a demand in somewhere like Rose Hill as well for more places where perhaps people have sort of comparatively less money to spend, but there's still be a huge demand. There's a huge opportunity for creating a sort of a more vibrant high street that would cater for like having a local cafe or just other places where people could meet and where people could socialize. But it's a lot to do with the quality of the public space, which is totally dominated, as you probably know, by roads and lack of any control over where people can park their cars and stuff. So it's just basically a giant car park and a really quite an unfriendly space to go into. So I think it also depends on what the public space is and how well it lends itself to, you know, creating an environment where independent shops and markets, etc., can thrive. And then Summertown did have a huge investment, didn't it, to support that?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a point I was just raising with some to try and get the council to do a bit of investment.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Nadine?
Yeah. I was just saying, in terms of my experience, I quite like to go to the town centre, living in Birmingham, you know, my sister, and I think the demand for like trying on clothes, because I find it quite hard to buy clothes without kind of trying them on first, and that experience. So I don't think that will ever go away. Those kind of shops will still exist. But I think shops are going to need to kind of provide more services than just selling a product. So if I use Birmingham as an example, we've just had like the world's biggest Primark built, and it's like it's cool, but it's kind of like, oh, are people going to use it in the future? And when you go in, it's not just clothes. They've now got like a nail bar, a hairdressers, and you've got places like Topshop and like Urban Outfitters who have like photo booths. So it's like the Disney shop. They've got those kind of experiences to attract people. And also kind of like Lush has now opened into a spa. I mean, obviously it happens in bigger cities, but I think that's the future of those kind of high streets and cafes and such. But also I think during the pandemic, people have been wanting to buy local and like support independent shops. So I think there is a place for them in the future, but the thing is that I'm not sure if they'll be able to like afford the rents in these kind of city centre places. Obviously in terms of high streets, I wouldn't say I necessarily go, because they're becoming more kind of underdeveloped and such. But I think in Birmingham what's nice is you've got kind of these cultural, is there like diasporas or some stuff like that, so you've got kind of these certain places where like cultures kind of gather, and their high streets are always really bustling because they sell like Target products that you wouldn't find in like Sainsbury's, for example. So I think that's where it's moving into. And like malls, some people don't like the idea of being indoors all the time, so I think a mixture of like, for example, in the Bullring in Birmingham, a mixture of being indoors and outdoors at the same time, a high street and kind of mall life, and mixing it with perhaps like kind of green spaces as well, where people can make a day out of it, and like a 24-hour economy, nightlife and stuff. I think, yeah, yeah. I was gonna say retail parks as well. I think are a bad thing, because you can just buy all their products online now, and they're just kind of an attraction for just like huge expansive like car parks. Yeah, that's my thought. Okay, I think we'll hear from Victoria and then we'll move on to the next video.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Okay, so my name is Victoria. For those who don't know me, I study architecture in Brazil, and I just wanted to share a bit of, hi Julia! I just wanted to share a bit of my experience here in the city that I live. So basically I sent 2 pictures in in the chat. So you can see the a view from the top of the public market that we have here. And basically what they did a few years ago is that they made a project. They had like independent shops before, and it is very, very, very like old market. It exists like 10 years, maybe more. And what they did is that they put some restaurants in the outside of the market instead of inside the public market. So this made the surroundings of the market more safe for people to walk by in the night, because those restaurants that were in the outside, they were putting like shows and like entertainment. So people would go have drinks and like occupy that space, and that made that surrounding more safe for the pedestrians to walk by during the night. And it brought up like more life to that part of the city, because like 20 years ago, it was a part that no one would go because of the safety problem. And so that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I'll share for the next one.
Sorry, Ingrid, just before you start, can I just say it's really interesting having people from different parts of the world in the conversation. I think it's really interesting seeing how different cultures in different cities do things. So yeah, thank you, Victoria.
Okay, so
welcome to this latest video from DPP Planning. One of the biggest challenges facing the country is what's going to happen to our town and city centres, particularly when it comes to retail, both from the impact of the pandemic, but also because of the shift to online shopping. Joining me today is DPP Director Bob Robinson, who's going to talk to us about town centres and their future. Hello, Bob.
Hello.
So, what significant structural changes have happened to town and city centres in recent years?
Well, there has been a gradual shift towards more and more online shopping, which followed on really after the shift from town centres to out-of-centre retailing. The increase in the amount of online spending, particularly in comparison goods, is now quite significant. I think towards the end of last year, something like 19% of all retail purchases were online, and really compounded by the loss of non-essential retail during the pandemic. That has now leapt to, I think it's close to 25% of the latest figures. So it's been a fairly significant shift. Now, the interesting thing is whether or not those changes will be reversed. I'm not convinced that people will be that keen to go back to town centres in quite the same numbers that they did previously, because they've become used to the convenience and perceived cheapness of online shopping, increasingly so. But also a lot of the fascias that drew people to town centres are no longer there. And I think there'll be potentially a few more casualties on that front as well. So I really do think there's going to be an increased shift towards a more broader experience in town centres. So, for example, more entertainment spaces, more flexible use spaces, potentially shop units becoming click and collect pickup facilities. So I think the nature of town centres will change. I think there's a future for town centres, but in a very different way.
So from a planning and development point of view, what has to change to attract people into town centres and maintain some sort of vibrancy, to almost return them to their original uses where they were a hub for communities?
Yes, I think increasingly there needs to be a need to look at the broader range of factors that attract people to town centres. They become more social spaces. So I think the idea of having primary shopping frontages, for example, is probably history now, because the type of uses that will bring people in will not be shops. They will be restaurants, they will be exhibition spaces, event spaces. That will be the reason that people visit town centres, not shopping, increasingly. And in that sense, I think recent changes that have been announced by government to increase the flexibility in commercial uses is probably a very good thing. I'm less convinced, though, that allowing uncontrolled access for residential users is necessarily beneficial. I think because there needs to be a proper consideration of the interface between different users, particularly things, for example, like music venues, where we have the agent of change policy introduced last year, which has been very, very important in allowing music venues to continue making sure that they aren't impacted by new residential development. My fear is that all that will now go out of the window and could potentially damage town centres, not because of the loss of the music venues themselves, because I think they may be caught up in the protections that's being offered to things like pubs and libraries. But it's more the indirect problems of building houses in close proximity to such uses without the proper provision being put in place to enforce the agent of change principle.
So in the past, one of the challenges to the high street and the town centres was out of town shopping. It looks like that they're suddenly finding themselves in the same position as town centres as a result of the shift to online shopping and from the pandemic. Obviously the most high profile being into the shopping mall owner going into administration. What's going to happen, do you think, to those sort of development sites, and will they see a change of use?
Some of them obviously will be repurposed again for town centre and other commercial uses under new ownership. There will have to be new lease and rental arrangements, etc. But I think that's probably been a long time coming. In certain cases, I think the asset value will plummet so much that people will look to alternative uses. An obvious repurposing of that sort of facility would be logistics and distribution linked to online shopping, or again, click and collect facilities. But I think in certain cases, you can probably also look at using them for residential development. One of the beauties of such locations being under unity of ownership is that the sites can be assembled and redeveloped quite easily. So I honestly can see quite a number of them being reused for residential development.
Thanks, well, that was a really interesting insight. Stay tuned for some more.
Okay. So yeah, that was the second one, and I suppose it also touched on points like Laura raised about housing and bringing that into the town centre. So yeah, if anyone's got any comments about that or thoughts.
I think I would sort of have to agree with this first point. I think that the pandemic and being so socially distanced from everyone and being locked away for so long is actually going to make people realise the significance of socialising and being with people. And I think the first thing we're all going to do when lockdown properly ends is go back in and start having dinner with our friends and start shopping again and start doing all of those things. So I think it's actually going to help revitalise those places, because I hate them. I think this is like the first time I've properly online shopped, and I think it's so impersonal. And I don't know, your package just turns up and it probably doesn't fit, and then you send it back and it's all a bit of an anticlimax. But actually, if you go into the high street, and then you can make a day of it, and then you can try some things on and you can grab a coffee, and it's just an experience. And I think that's really important. And I think the way the high streets to revitalise is maybe, as the guy touched upon, is for those shop leases to be shorter and for the shop terms to be more flexible, because no longer can people take 10-year commercial leases, which is pretty much what they were signing up for before, for hundreds of thousands of square foot. And that's not going to be a very resilient business model. But if you have smaller units and you do them for sort of 12-month period at a time, then it's going to be a lot more better for shopkeepers, because the risk is lower. And even if they do decide they start out in a venture that they might not have to begin with because the risk is too high, even if they do that and it ends, and then someone else comes in. So that kind of keeps the vitality that way. And lastly, I think that independents are the future of the high street, because I think they're a lot more resilient anyway. I think if you've got a high street full of H&M and Topshop and Debenhams and John Lewis, they can't maneuver themselves if market conditions change overnight. But the smaller independents have a lot more flexibility to do that. They can just suddenly go to click and collect, or suddenly change their business model from, I don't know, having like a wine and cheese bar to doing takeaway cheese platters for everyone in the community, and they're going to be a lot more resilient and not fall so quickly if something like this does happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you're right in saying that the pandemic is really going to highlight the importance, or sort of reinstate the value that we had for the town centre.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's interesting what you said, Becky, about how making a day of it, because I think a lot of places, they had like clothing shop. They didn't have cafes. They didn't have a place where you could sit. They didn't have an art gallery where you could go for an hour or two. I think somewhere like Oxford, I don't know if anyone's been to, I don't know what it's called. It's like just before you go to Westgate and you turn left and there's like an art gallery there. One of my friends took me there basically, and it was really nice to just break up the day. I mean, I know we live in Oxford, but like it was nice to just break up the day and go there for like a couple of hours. Whereas I think a lot of high street don't actually have that. All it is just shopping, and people get tired and people get bored. Like every Saturday, that's not what they want to do anymore. They want to go and they want different things.
And even if it's for attracting different people as well. So I used to live in Salisbury, where my partner still lives, and that has died a death. Salisbury is no more. There are no more shops there. So when we would decide where to go shopping for the day, we'd think, okay, well, Southampton is the closest, but Southampton is literally like a worse Westgate. So it's just an indoor shopping mall and there is nothing else. So like, no, let's travel an extra 45 minutes to go to Portsmouth, where there's the shopping, but also there's like the regenerated coastal area where there's all the old like historical ships, and there's a new museum, and there's like a park you can walk around and stuff. So I think it is a day, and I think city centres have to have a lot more to offer people than just shops, because although shopping is good and has to be done, if people go there, they want to do more than that for the day. They want at least just a nice park to walk around afterwards, or I don't know, even like Oxford Castle, just having a little look around all the history there. So yeah, I agree.
What's interesting is that both Isabel and I worked with Modern Art Oxford that Nadine mentioned. And what's interesting is that they have a very different view of what gallery or museum is. So we try to work with artists, with different traders, and also community groups in terms of seeing it very much part of that Oxford experience. And unfortunately, because we were hit by pandemic, so some of the ideas are not implemented, but they will be once it's opened again. And I just also want to mention that there are two interesting cases of larger shopping centers being repurposed for different uses. So in one case, it was that the university decided to have presence on High Street. So this is where they were showing, it was linked to health, and they were showing homeopathy and massage, etc. And that was also interconnected with various other uses. So if you look at the Rose Hill Community Center, which has a library, a Keep Fit center, etc. Something like this has been already considered in some of the places. And in Bista, which is part of the Healthy Bista project, there is a very good relationship between the traders and the Public Health England. So you go into town in order to learn about your health. You can have your blood pressure measured, etc. So again, that helped the return of some of the shops onto High Street.
Thank you, Georgia. I think Isabel, do you want to go next?
Yeah, it was just a quick comment. Wait, sorry, I've never used this raising your hand thing about like I'm not sure who said something about like the cafes and shops, and I've been seeing more and more, obviously post or before COVID and even during in between lockdowns, kind of mixing cafes and like clothing shops together. So on the like front there's like a cafe, and then as you go in you can kind of go and shopping for like clothes. So it's like mixing together that experience. So maybe that is like the way forward to because I know personally I agree with what people are saying about online shopping. It's great for stuff like things that you don't have to try on, but when it comes to clothes, I feel like I need to go in the shop and actually try it on rather than buying it online and then it doesn't fit. And so yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with what everyone's been saying.
I think also it's quite interesting about, I think people are more inclined now to shop online. Really weirdly, I had a weird conversation with my dad this morning. I needed a calculator. And I was like, I'm just going to drive to the supermarket and I'm going to buy myself a calculator. And my dad just said to me, just order it online, it will come tomorrow. And I was like, it's a 5-minute drive. I mean, I think I can just, you know, and I think that's why people need an incentive to leave the house and to go to the high street. They need something, they need to think, oh, I'm going to meet up with a friend for a coffee. And then while I'm there, I'm going to just do my weekly shop. I think it's very hard now after being in 3 lockdowns for people to just want to go for a day out shopping. I don't know, that's just like obviously my personal opinion, but I do think people are very used to the home life by now.
Definitely.
Isabel?
Yeah, I have to say I love shopping. I really love shopping, but to buy things that I cannot find online. For example, if I like to go to the market in Oxford just to get these plantain bananas because to cook, because here you don't, in your super Tesco's, they don't even know them. But for example, to make different things that you don't usually, you can't have in the supermarkets, that be one key of that makes people go there. And I would like to say a case, well, when I was studying my undergraduate, which was many, many years ago, I went to an absolutely paradise place, lovely weather. It's called Tlaxcala, which is in central Mexico. And it's a really tiny city. And the reason that it's a very successful place and everyone loves to go to the center, it's because they have a small museum and where you are where there's a lady, lots of old people teaching how to do, for example, traditional string with wools, and so having a goal to do things, to produce things, that will be one thing for example, supermarkets can provide. But for example, I think a way to revitalize high streets is to offer people to learn things, to have a go and learn skills. So I love that experience, because in Tlaxcala is famous because they sell really nice wool clothes, you know, with wool clothes and really traditional clothes. So you can have the experience to produce them with them. And it was that's an experience that I kept with me after so many years. And I definitely think as soon as I can, I'm going back again. It's really nice, really lovely place to go, by the way.
I think also an added struggle now, though, with the pandemic is whether the social distancing measures that are in place now will stick after, and whether then that will impact smaller businesses who may not be able to sort of include as much stock or as many tables for customers and all that kind of stuff. So kind of the impact of that and how they're going to adapt to that. Because I think this might just be me, but I quite like it being a bit more distanced from people when I'm eating my meal. Because you kind of realize actually how close sometimes you were sat next to other people and all that kind of stuff. So some aspects of it, I think I'd personally quite like to stay, but other bits, I don't know whether they'll carry on after this is all over. Yeah.
I think, Ingrid, that's a really interesting point, because I don't know who came to Amsterdam just like this time last year, just before lockdown. And when we were in Amsterdam, we were literally just sat in cafes, restaurants, and all this completely normal. And in the first lockdown, I thought about it a lot, about how I don't think we can ever go back to the way we used to live. I honestly, I mean, as much as I would love it, I don't think that we can, because we are all too used to our own space now. We're too used to being socially distanced from people. If I go to a restaurant and then there's someone sat right next to me on the table, like, you know, like Wagamamas, for example, they have like the long tables where they just sit you next to random people. If that were to happen to me now, I would honestly probably leave, because I just feel too like claustrophobic, I guess. So I think the learning from the pandemic is that we need bigger spaces for people, and small businesses probably don't have the capacity for that. They probably can't afford rent in a bigger place. So yeah, I don't know what's next.
If I may come in here, I think what I have noticed during the summer when I was able to come out a bit is that the street, the public space became an extension of the interior space. So I think that actually may have positive impact because, you know, we may be more socially distanced, etc. And I also noticed that some of the coffee shops diversified and they became grocers in addition to being coffee shops and offering various other services. So in a sense, it is almost like return to the kind of earlier pattern of shopping and organization of shops, rather than just looking at it's a single shop and you just go to buy this. So it's a kind of locally appropriate eating place, social space, etc. But also the public space outside will play a key role.
Just looking at the chat, what Christy said about making an effort to shop at small businesses, and also the Covered Market in Oxford. I don't know how many people have been to the Covered Market, but it's honestly my favorite place in Oxford. I don't know about anyone else, but even in lockdown 2, I was literally there every day. I love the place so much, and I think somewhere like that, it really offers like a personal shopping experience, I think. And I think places like that are the places that are going to thrive after COVID. And also, this is a bit of a more separate note, but Georgia, what you said about making the street more of a public space, I think that's happening in neighborhoods as well, not just in the high street. I mean, personally for us, I live in kind of like almost a cul-de-sac, and just at the end of lockdown 1, we would all sit in the street and like play bingo together. And I think if it weren't for COVID, that would have never happened. So it's nice to see that everyone's kind of coming together a bit more now. Yeah. Sorry, I've really taken over. Does anyone else have anything to say?
Yeah. I was just trying to summarize everything that I heard. So independent shops, face-to-face, like larger corporate shops, more online, housing, so mixed use, more experience of like place to stay, larger place for people, maybe becoming the new campaign rather than just place for people. What else did we say? If we could put like a manifesto for the new high street.
If I can add something, I think it also has something to do, you know, by creating the hubs and using the Apple Store example. I think it also creates like the sensation. I mean, when we buy a product, we are not only buying like the thing, we're buying the whole like status quo that brings with the thing. And also we are becoming part of the community of people that also uses the same thing. So I think it has something to do with the feeling of belonging to a community. And I think like nowadays, people like seek for it. Like everyone wants to belong to something. And like, if I go to an Apple store and I can stay there and talk, and they have workshops, so I can like meet new people that like the same things as I. So I think it also has something to do with this thing that when we buy stuff, we're not only buying the thing, we're also buying the symbolic thing, like becoming part of it.
Yeah, I think that's really important, the community hubs, especially after being in lockdown. I think that's really important. I think this is the end of our session now. So I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for coming along and joining in the discussion. It's been really interesting, and also to hear from other people's perspectives. So I look forward to seeing you all next week at our final sort of event in the series. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for organizing it.
It was great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for organizing. Very good discussion.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Yeah, great job organizing it. It was very good.
Next week we've got Mike Stubbs, by the way. So.
What's the topic next week?
Biodiversity, net gain, and kind of the environment, designing with the climate in mind.